Welcome back. We're at the Nabahoe River here. It's beautiful. Today we're going to talk about the first American Speedway legend. He was an amazing rider, one of the very best ever in American Speedway, and he was just super famous. And he had a brother who was pretty much equally as good, so they had a great brother combination. And he rode in 1968. That was the very beginning of Speedway. That was before the beginning of Speedway. He was just a young 15-year-old kid and riding Speedway. We'll talk all about the early days, and we're going to do a two-part series, maybe a three-part series, maybe a four-part series, about the legendary, the fast Michael Bast. Mike was born January 6, 1953 in California, and he was raised around motorcycles with his Uncle Harlan Bast. He was racing TT and flat track, and the brothers, the Bast brothers, Mike and Steve, they tagged along and they watched Uncle Harlan race. They tagged along and watched their Uncle Harlan race TT and scrambles, and they started developing a love for motorcycles. At the age of 9 and 10, Mike and Steve, they got their first motorcycle, and they're learning how to shift the bike and how to ride. And by the age of 10, Mike was actually racing. These guys just had it. I mean, they were gifted from God at the beginning. Mike and Steve Bast. Mike and Steve start winning racing motorcycles at an early age. Mike's favorite rider was Dick Bugsley Mann. Did you see him on any Sunday? I think he broke his leg and he sawed off his cast to ride. Mike just loved Dick Mann. Dick Mann was a very famous TT rider in the early days. And Mike said he wanted to emulate Dick Mann and be just as good as Dick Mann is. But I think Mike was a little better. By the age of 13, Mike was a top TT scrambles rider. He was winning everywhere. Mike was racing all the circuit in California. Mike was riding the scramblers. He was doing everything. He liked the short track, like the speedway track. And at the age of 13, Mike and Steve won many motorcycle trophies. In 1968, Mike was a young 15-year-old motorcycle rider, and he was just bebopping around, and he saw this motorcycle poster. The Whiteman Stadium motorcycle speedway racing, and it was held every week at the Whiteman Stadium. And Mike turned to his brother Steve and said, "This is very interesting. Maybe we should check this out." They went ahead and attended the speedway races, and immediately they were hooked on speedway. The Whiteman Stadium was held in an airport hangar area, and it was promoted by the late great Dude Criswell. And Dude went ahead and brought the speedway back even before Costa Mesa. He ran that track in 1968 and 1969. And Dude went ahead and had this speedway. It was brought back to America the first time in many years. And it was really great. One of the problems was the track was the spectator set so dang far from the speedway. It was kind of difficult for the fans to see. And that's when Harry Oxley and Jack Milne went ahead and started thinking like, hey, we can make a speedway track where the people are on top of the action. They went ahead and created the Costa Mesa Speedway, probably inspired by the Whiteman Stadium and Dude Criswell. Mike and Steve's first bike was an old JAP Speedway bike. An old JAP Speedway. I rode an old JAP Speedway, and they're pretty fast. And Mike and Steve shared that bike to begin, and they went ahead directly and went to the Whiteman Stadium and started racing. And Steve went ahead and picked up a ride on one of the Speedway teams. And Mike was a little behind, but he was in some of the main events at the Whiteman Stadium. Dude Criswell, he had the first team event racing in 1968. He brought Speedway back and immediately went into teams. They had two teams. One was the Red Devils, and that was led by Slide and Sonny Nutter. Bruce Hazerock and Steve Bast made that team also. The other team was called the Tigers, and that was led by Sammy Tanner, Rick Woods, and Stu Morley. They had team racing in 1968. The Bast brothers were still learning how to ride a speedway bike. They were not the famous Bast brothers as they were later at Costa Mesa, but that was the beginning. Everybody has to have a beginning, right? The first National Speedway champion since a revival of Speedway was 1968. And the first national champion of Speedway was the Rocket Rick Woods. The early days of the Bast brothers, everyone knew that there would be something big coming from the Bast brothers. And it did. They became super famous. But today we wanted to talk about the early days of Mike Bast and Steve Bast. So please check out some of the videos up here. We have more videos you might be interested in, and subscribe. And we appreciate you joining the family of subscribers and watching these blogs. They're really cool. This is a history lesson of early day Speedway. So please like, share, subscribe, and always ring that bell.